Greetings, industry colleagues, and welcome to our fourth quarter webinar. My name is Siku Mbhalati, and I am joined by my colleague Taryne Birks. We are both analysts in the Conduct of Business Financial Advisors and Intermediary Department of the FSCA. How are you doing today, Taryne?
I'm good, thanks. And how about you, Siku?
I'm doing well, thanks. So, as part of our ongoing engagement with the industry, the authority has noted the need to discuss the risk management policy and how FSPs can effectively implement it in practice. Today, we'll be unpacking risk management in a practical Q&A format, focusing on how you as FSPs can implement it effectively in your day-to-day operations. Taryne, are you ready to get started?
Absolutely, Siku. Risk management sometimes sounds technical, but in reality, it's about running a responsible, sustainable business and protecting your clients.
Thanks, Taryne. And what are the applicable laws and regulations?
The key provisions are Section 11, 12, and 13 of the General Code of Conduct. In summary, these sections require FSPs to have appropriate systems, procedures, and internal controls, minimize the risk of financial loss to clients and other parties, and maintain adequate professional indemnity or fidelity insurance cover. Together, these form the regulatory foundation for effective risk management.
Thanks, Taryne. And what is a risk?
At its core, risk is simply the possibility that something could happen which affects your business objectives. And risk management is the process of identifying those risks, assessing how serious they are, putting controls in place, and then continuously monitoring whether those controls are working.
Thanks, Taryne. Could you explain what you meant by identify, assess, mitigate, and monitor risk?
Of course, Seku. So when we say identify, we mean recognizing what could realistically go wrong in your business, whether that's fraud, advice risk, or even IT failures. Assess means determining how likely that risk is and how severe the impact would be. Mitigate is about putting controls in place to reduce that risk. And monitor means checking consistently that those controls are actually working. That cycle should be continuous and not something done once and forgotten.
Thanks, Taryne. And what is required from FSPs when it comes to risk management?
FSPs must have effective systems, procedures, and resources in place to reduce risks such as fraud, negligence, misconduct, data breaches, or administrative errors. For example, simple measures like segregation of duties or maintaining appropriate professional indemnity cover can significantly reduce exposure to financial loss. The key point is that controls must be practical and implemented and not just documented for compliance purposes.
How should an FSP identify and manage its risks?
An FSP should conduct a risk assessment and maintain a risk register where risks are identified, rated, mitigated, and reviewed frequently. Risks may be operational, advice-related, compliance-based, or client-focused, and importantly, new or emerging risks should be added as they arise. For example, in larger FSPs, this may be overseen by dedicated personnel. In smaller FSPs, the responsibility usually lies with the key individual.
Thanks, Taryne. And how should an FSP customize its risk management to suit its own business model?
Risk management must reflect the size, complexity, and nature of the services offered. An FSP must identify the risks most relevant to its own operations and then implement controls, monitor, and report on the specific risks. Using a generic template without tailoring it to your actual operations often results in gaps. For example, a low-risk FSP might only need to address basic operational and compliance risks, while a high-risk FSP dealing with complex financial instruments must cover far more. Customization ensures the plan is meaningful and practical and not just a compliance exercise.
Thanks, Taryne. And what is a risk management plan and what should it include?
A risk management plan is a structured document that explains how an FSP identifies, assesses, manages, and monitors the risks within its business. In simple terms, it is the FSP's practical framework for managing risk proactively rather than reactively. The risk management plan should set out the following: the type of risk, its likelihood and impact, mitigation measures, the person responsible, and review dates. Risks are typically rated using a simple risk matrix to help prioritize high-risk areas.
And what measures should an FSP take to manage its risk?
An FSP should have a documented risk management plan that is reviewed consistently or when there are industry developments. It must implement clear policies, procedures, and systems supported by staff training and ongoing compliance monitoring. Controls should also be tested to ensure they are working effectively, and the depth of testing will depend on the size and complexity of the FSP. For example, if advice risk is identified, the FSP may implement structured fact finds, suitability assessments, and supervisory file reviews.
Taryne, and how do FSPs ensure that they have effective controls in place?
Policies must not only exist, but they must also be embedded in daily operations. FSPs should monitor and test key controls frequently, document any weaknesses identified, and implement corrective action promptly. The risk management framework should also be reviewed periodically to ensure it adapts to changes in the business and regulatory environment.
And how can staff at all levels contribute to risk management?
Risk management is not only management's responsibility. Staff who interact with clients, process transactions, or perform reconciliations play a critical role in identifying irregularities early. Regular training ensures everyone understands their responsibilities and contributes to a culture of compliance.
Thanks, Taryne. And who should be responsible for each risk category?
Ultimately, the FSP is accountable for risk oversight. Responsibilities may be allocated to senior managers in larger firms. In smaller FSPs, this responsibility typically rests with the owner or key individual.
Thanks, Taryne. And what is a risk register and why is it important?
A risk register is a structured document where an FSP records its risks, rates their likelihood and impact, and documents controls and mitigation actions. It is important because it creates a proactive and organized approach to managing risks. For example, failure to submit regulatory returns or maintain fit and proper requirements may result in license suspension by the FSCA and financial loss. Recording and tracking this risk reduces the likelihood of such consequences.
And what is a risk rating and why is it important?
Risk rating assesses the likelihood and impact of a risk, often using a risk matrix. It allows the FSP to prioritize high-risk areas and allocate resources efficiently. Not all risks require the same level of attention. Aligned with the FSP's regulatory obligations, risk rating supports sound governance and informed decision-making.
Thanks, Taryne. And what are the consequences of poor risk management?
If risks are not identified and managed, the consequences can be severe. Poor risk management can result in regulatory sanctions, financial loss, reputational damage, and ultimately business closure. Identifying and managing risk proactively protects both clients and the sustainability of the business.
Thank you, Taryne, for sharing those valuable insights today. Before we conclude, an FSP should note that a risk management policy should not simply meet regulatory requirements. It should be proportionate to your business, actively used, and reviewed regularly. When implemented properly, risk management protects your clients, strengthens your governance, and supports long-term sustainability in the financial sector. We would like to thank you for joining this session today, and we hope that this session was useful. Thanks, Taryne, for being part of this webinar, and thank you to everyone that took their time in watching the webinar. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.